Welcome to this explainer. Hello to all the grade 9 students at St. Paul American School, Clark. Today, we're jumping right into G9 Biology Unit 6, Lesson 1, Introduction to Plants and Plant Evolution and Adaptations. We're going on an epic evolutionary journey to discover exactly how plants made the Great Migration from water to dry land. Our objective today is to really understand the evolutionary history of plants, look at the vital adaptations they developed to survive outside of the water, and explore the fascinating characteristics of the very first pioneers of land, the non-vascular plants.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We've got 1. The origin of plants. 2. Conquering the land. 3. The alternation of generations model. 4. Non-vascular plants. 5. Misconception and knowledge checks, and we'll wrap up with 6, a core concept recap.
All right, Section 1, the origin of plants, tracing the ancestral lineage. To really understand plants, we have to travel way back in time to their aquatic origins. Before Earth was covered in green forests and sprawling grasslands, the ancestors of all modern plants were just swimming in the water. So, the crucial takeaway here is that land plants didn't just magically appear out of thin air. They actually share a direct common ancestor with a group of ancient freshwater green algae known as charophytes. Evidence indicates that these unicellular freshwater green algae were the granddaddies of present-day plants. When we compare modern plants to charophytes, we see unmistakable biological family ties. I mean, they share very specific traits like their photosynthetic pigments, specifically chlorophyll A and B. They both have cell walls made of cellulose, and they even share similarities in how they store their energy, as starch. Now, evolution brilliantly illustrates this leap. While both share some older traits like flagellated sperm, true land plants derived entirely new traits to survive on dry Earth. As evolution progressed, plants developed features that are completely absent in charophytes. For example, true land plants possess apical meristems. These are basically localized regions of cell division right at the tips of their roots and shoots. They also evolved multicellular dependent embryos that are actively protected by the parent plant, along with walled spores produced in specialized structures called sporangia. These are the derived traits that officially draw the line between algae and true plants.
Section 2. Conquering the land, Challenges and Solutions.
Moving out of the water was literally an existential crisis for early plants, presenting a harsh new set of environmental rules that they absolutely had to overcome. Out in the open air, the constant threat of drying out or desiccation was immediate. Think about it. In water, buoyancy supports the plant body, but on land, you've got gravity constantly pulling you down. Furthermore, in an aquatic environment, sperm can just easily swim to an egg, but on land, plants had to figure out entirely new ways to reproduce without a continuous medium of water. But hey, it wasn't all bad news. Moving to land also offered some massive advantages, like vastly increased sunlight for photosynthesis, way greater carbon dioxide availability, and, at least initially, a wide-open landscape totally free of plant-eating herbivores.
What's really fascinating is how plants biologically invented direct solutions to those life-threatening challenges. To stop from drying out, they developed a cuticle. It's this waxy lipid coating over their surface that acts just like a waterproof jacket to prevent fatal water loss. But of course, a waterproof jacket also seals off air, so plants evolved stomata. These are tiny little pores that can open and close for controlled gas exchange. Finally, to protect their reproductive cycles, they evolved multicellular gametangia. These are essentially structural safe houses that produce and protect gametes, keeping their dependent embryos safe from the harsh, dry world outside.
Moving right along to Section 3, Alternation of Generations model.
Survival on land also required a highly specialized reproductive strategy, which brings us to our step-by-step analysis model of plant life cycles. Before we look at the cycle itself, we have to define the two major multicellular forms a plant takes. Unlike humans, plants actually alternate between two completely distinct multicellular phases. First, you have the haploid gametophyte, which carries a single set of chromosomes, denoted as N. Its main job is to produce gametes. Then there is the diploid sporophyte, carrying two sets of chromosomes, or 2N, and its job is to produce spores.
By following these 4 steps, you can trace exactly where mitosis and meiosis happen as the plant alternates between these two distinct generations. In step 1, the haploid gametophyte uses mitosis to create haploid gametes, sperm and eggs. In step 2, these gametes fuse during fertilization to form a diploid zygote. In step 3, this zygote grows through mitosis into the multicellular diploid sporophyte. The sporophyte then undergoes meiosis to produce haploid spores. And finally, in step 4, those spores disperse and grow through mitosis back into a new multicellular gametophyte, starting the endless cycle all over again.
Section 4. Nonvascular plants, the pioneers.
With all these terrestrial adaptations and a robust life cycle in place, the very first major group of plants to colonize land were the non-vascular plants. They completely bridged the gap between water and earth. These early pioneers are known as bryophytes, and incredibly today, more than 17,000 species of bryophytes still survive. Because they completely lack internal plumbing, which we call vascular tissue, they just cannot transport water and dissolve substances over long distances. This means they not only lack true leaves, stems, and seeds, but they are physically restricted to damp, moist habitats where they rely on simple osmosis and diffusion to survive.
If you were to look really closely at a patch of moss, you'd notice something super interesting. Instead of true roots, non-vascular plants have these tiny hair-like structures called rhizoids. While they might look a bit like roots, their primary job is really just to anchor the plant to the ground and absorb a little bit of moisture and minerals. But because they don't have true vascular tissue, they aren't nearly as efficient at absorbing water as the roots of the larger plants we see today. That's exactly why they need to live in a dense, moisture-retaining carpet.
There are actually 3 modern types of non-vascular plants, and each is uniquely adapted to survive. First up are liverworts, which are tiny and often have these ribbon-like photosynthetic tissues called a thallus structure growing in ground carpeting colonies. Next, we have hornworts. They're similarly minute, but they are uniquely characterized by their long, pointed sporophytes that literally look like tiny horns rising above the plant body. And finally, mosses. These tend to be slightly larger, have coarser multicellular rhizoids, and they grow in dense clumps to really maximize their moisture retention.
Section 5. Misconception and knowledge checks.
Let's pause our journey for just a second to clear up a few common misunderstandings about plant biology and taxonomy that frequently trip up students. A very common trap is calling charophytes plants. Because they share so many traits, it's super easy to lump them together. But remember, they are actually green algae. They are the evolutionary cousins and ancestors, not true land plants themselves. True plants have those derived traits we talked about earlier, like apical meristems and multicellular dependent embryos. Also, when naming plants, we often encounter a major taxonomy error found in science project books or even educational websites. When looking at binomial nomenclature, the second word isn't the species name itself. It's just a specific epithet. The 2 words combined, Quercus alba, make up the actual species name. Being really precise with this terminology is key to classifying plants correctly.
All right, time for a quick knowledge check to test your understanding of cause and effect in evolution. Think back to those massive environmental challenges of leaving the water. What structural barrier might a plant need to keep its internal water from evaporating into the dry air?
If you guessed the cuticle, you hit the nail right on the head. This waxy lipid layer was an absolute game changer for terrestrial survival, keeping the water safely locked inside the plant's tissues, while the stomata evolved alongside it to ensure the plant didn't suffocate and could still exchange gases.
And finally, Section 6, Core Concept Recap.
Let's bring all of these evolutionary milestones together to recap the core concepts you should take away from this explainer. To summarize, ancient freshwater green algae known as charophytes gave rise to early land plants. These brave pioneers survived the harsh terrestrial environment by evolving protective waxy cuticles, stomata, and protected multicellular embryos. They established a complex life cycle alternating between haploid gametophytes and diploid sporophytes. And finally, those early pioneers are represented today by non-vascular plants or bryophytes, which completely lack internal plumbing and true roots, restricting them to small sizes and damp environments.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. The next time you look outside at a forest, a lawn, or even just a tiny patch of moss on a rock, consider just how a microscopic layer of wax changed the entire surface of our planet forever. Without that single, simple adaptation, the terrestrial world as we know it might still be completely barren. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.